Friendship doesn't know what hard is. He's not like you or me. He's never had to worry about his health care or his rent or his groceries. I'm Marcus Jones, and I'm a retired Army colonel. And while I was defending our Constitution, he was voting against the interests of women and veterans and our seniors. I want to serve your family in Congress because what matters to you matters to me. And after 10 years, French has failed all of us. I'm Marcus Jones, I approve this message, and I am asking for your vote.
Welcome to Community Conversations, where we connect you with the leaders shaping the future of Arkansas. I'm your host, Steve Grapp, and today we're joined by Marcus Jones, a retired Army colonel and Democratic candidate for Arkansas's 2nd Congressional District. With a distinguished military career and deep roots in Arkansas, Marcus is here to discuss his vision for our state and the nation. In this episode, we'll explore key issues such as the Middle East conflict, immigration control, and reproductive rights, while highlighting Marcus's strengths and plans for Arkansas. So sit back and get ready to engage in a meaningful conversation that will help you make informed decisions this election season. Marcus, welcome to the show.
Steve, thank you for having me. It's always great to talk to you, and I'm excited. This is my first time, so I'm excited to do it.
I appreciate you. I want everybody to know who you are. So tell us a little bit about your journey from military background and what brought you to running for office.
Well, thank you. First off, so I am from Arkansas. My family, we have, as you said, we've got deep roots here. I grew up in Jonesboro, but originally my family's mostly from Independence County. I was born in Newport, and then we moved to Jonesboro when I was just a couple of months old. And we were there until I was in high school. Moved initially out of state, and then I came back to attend the University of Arkansas. That's why I'm a Razorback 1994 graduate. And through that process, I had enlisted in the Army Reserves when I graduated high school, went to basic and AIT, all those things that you do to leverage my GI Bill, which got me to the U of A. And while I was there, I was in ROTC, and I received an ROTC scholarship. So upon graduation, I was commissioned a second lieutenant of field artillery. And that started the long period of my career. Also, while I was up at the U of A, in my last semester, I met my wife. And so we married right after my graduation. So we've been married 30 years now. Our move back here to Arkansas, which we did in 2020, was our 15th move as a family. So we were in 8 different states. I was in Iraq, obviously by myself, twice in 2005 to 6, and then again in 2008 to 9. But also with my family, we were stationed in Seoul, South Korea from 2015 to 17. And then we were in Stavanger, Norway from 17 to 20. And I was in a NATO assignment there. So we were kind of all over the world, but we're still Arkansans. Our families are here. We've always had an interest in what was going on in our state. And there are 2 colonel assignments for a full colonel in Arkansas for a regular Army. One of those is the State Inspector General, and the other one is what's called a SRAG, which is the Senior Regular Army Advisor to the Guard. And I was very fortunate to be the SRAG is my final assignment that brought us back here. And I always say that to put us here in Little Rock, which is somewhat equidistant between my in-laws in Northwest Arkansas and my mom in Northeast Arkansas. My dad passed in 18. My mom is there in Independence County. So we're equidistant between the two of them, which is perfect because you can get one place or the other on a Saturday, but nobody comes to Little Rock without calling. So that's the best distance that you can have. So we came back here. We're very lucky to put roots down back into Little Rock, and we did that in 2020. And really in that 2020 election and then in the 2022 election, being a student of politics and interested in policy and those kind of things, one of my master's degrees is in national security studies from the U.S. Army War College, and the other one is in management and leadership from Webster University. So I have an interest in those kind of things. Observing what was going on in our state, policy that was coming out of our state legislature that was being brought in, Arkansas was very different than it was when I was growing up in Jonesboro. And really coming out of the 2022 election, we started to see our state actively marginalizing folks. And along a lot of different culture war lines, I'm a believer that one of the first things government ought to do is not actively hurt people. I didn't spend my life defending other people's rights all over the world to come back here and see people losing theirs. Because I was a regular Army officer and on active duty, I was legally prohibited from participating in any sort of partisan politics and until after my retirement. I could study and I could read and I could, amongst personally and friends, talk about, maybe this is something I want to do, but I couldn't act on it and couldn't raise money, couldn't announce, couldn't be part of any political party. But I was really looking at running for a state legislative seat. And other people that I discussed this with, given my national security background and my education and experience, recommended that Congress might be a better fit. I always joke that is not what we had agreed to in my house. So that was a discussion that we had to have, because you don't do this by yourself. It's a whole family thing. What I truly said is I didn't want to put my family unnecessarily through all the things that you have to do. And it's an incredible time. You give up so much of your privacy in your personal life and all those things. But it was really my kids, who are both adults, that said, look, your entire life, you have been in service of our nation. This is very much like a continuation of service. This is the right fit, the right experience, and maybe this truly is something you should do. So that's really what started us on the journey to make the decision to run for Congress. And the reason why is I did not see a lot of the potential that we have here in the 2nd District. I didn't see that being delivered back on. I just didn't see our current representative representing the interests of regular working families, our seniors, our veterans, our teachers, our farmers. I didn't see them reflected in the things that he was concerned about, the things he was doing, and what was coming back to our district. I'm a public school educated, middle-class kid. Most of my family are involved in agriculture. My in-laws have a farm. My mom lives in the house that sits on the farm that her grandfather or her father farmed, her brother farmed, now her nephew farms. I have sisters-in-laws that are teachers. I have a brother-in-law that's a police officer. I have a brother that's a small business owner. And those are my people. And I didn't see that being represented here in the 2nd District in Congress. And that was really the beginning of how this all started and how it happened, because I think we can do so much more and so much better than what we have happening right now.
Thank you for your service first and what you've done for the nation before you ran, and hopefully we can move that into the U.S. Congress. I want to talk about something very specific that I think is important for the people to understand where your strengths line up right now. You've got some experience understanding the intricacies of what's going on in the Middle East. But I think you have a unique understanding that this isn't just a surface level decisions that have to be made. And if we can get you to Congress, that gives an expert voice when it comes down to deciding how we make policy and how things are affected in our national foreign policy around the Middle East and even the Ukraine.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. I spent a little over 2.5 years in the Middle East. 2 different years I was there in Iraq, and then I was also there for almost 5.5 or so months in 1996, not too long after the first Gulf War. And I spent a long time studying that region as well. And so I think I do bring a perspective that's different. Oftentimes you get people that are armchair diplomats that want to tell you what they think, or often more than that, what they feel, rather than what's on the ground. So I did spend a lot of time looking at this. And when we talk about Israel, sometimes this isn't exactly a popular opinion. I do believe that Israel is our ally, and we do stand by an ally. They're in a tough neighborhood, and we have to support an ally when they're in an existential fight. And so I do support our role in defending and helping Israel defend itself. There's a lot of ways we can do that, whether that's through intelligence sharing, whether that's through materiel sharing, whether that's through training that we may provide them, or whether it is through actual defense using our capabilities and systems like we've seen recently. But I also believe that as a member of the international community, we owe it to the Palestinians that are in Gaza to ensure that their humanitarian rights are protected. And I know some would say, okay, you're trying to come down on both sides of the issue. And I'm not. Our engagement to Israel is the mechanism that we can use to influence how they fight that fight. And so when people say we need to step back, stepping back just means that there is no one working with them. There is no one observing. There is no one guiding how that fight
Nudging toward accountability.
will happen. There is no mechanism for holding them accountable. So I think that we have to be involved on both sides of that. I'm a believer, as has been many folks that have come in years before me. I'm a believer that the only way that we ultimately see any sort of resolution is going to have to be a two-state solution. And that's what we have got to work towards. And we've got to influence that on both sides of that problem. Obviously things have expanded now in Lebanon with now that this is a fight with Hezbollah. But again, any fight with Hamas is a fight with Iran. Any fight with Hezbollah is a fight with Iran. And so we have to understand that. And we have to understand, where that is coming from. I will say, there's been all the discussion of this problem was caused because, they allowed Iran to sell its petroleum, and that's how they're funding terrorism. They were funding terrorism before. And so, anyone that says that is either, trying to push an agenda or they're completely unfamiliar with...
Ill-informed.
Yeah, ill-informed with that part of the world and with what Iran's doing. My real frustration with Iran and with our situation with Iran is that when we did pull out under the Trump administration, we backed out of the Iran nuclear deal. And people will say, okay, well, the Iran nuclear deal wasn't any good.
Yeah, criticism for $500,000 in the belly of a plane or whatever.
Yeah, it's criticism. But what the Iran nuclear deal was our ability to engage diplomatically with Iran. And by pulling out of it, we don't have a mechanism now. We have to rely on our own friends in that part of the world that may or may not have the greatest relationship with us sometimes, and may or may not have a great relationship with Iran to help us try and influence that. So what we don't have anymore is we don't have a carrot or a stick to influence this challenge. We have to remain engaged around the world in all these places where we have our interests. I was in NATO during the Trump administration, and every time there would be the discussion of we're going to pull out of NATO, we're going to step back, I would get a phone call to come upstairs to my commander's office, who was my first commander there was a Pole, and my second one was a German. And, it was like, hey, please come in, have a cup of coffee. Okay, look, is anything,
is this real?
Are y'all getting ready to pack them and go home? And it was kind of tongue in cheek, but also, that's a real concern. And I think we have to look at it and say, look, everywhere we stepped back from in those years, everywhere we do that, one of our adversaries is stepping in. And I'll use Africa as an example. Everywhere we stepped back in,
China,
in those years, China stepped in with a checkbook.
Yep.
And now we don't have those same inroads. We don't have that foothold. We don't have that influence into those places. There's 4 elements of national power, that what we call the dime, right? Diplomatic, informational, military, and economic. The challenge is when the only tool in your toolbox is a hammer, or the military, that's your only tool in the toolbox, every solution looks like a nail. And what we've got to do is do a better job in using the full complement of the dime, our diplomatic influence, our informational influence, those things that we've got to do a better job with. And that's why, for all the criticism that has been levied against, the Biden administration, I would say that, Secretary Blinken has done an incredible job under the most arduous, difficult set of circumstances that's been handed to him in everything that he could do in dealing with Israel, and he continues to do an incredible job. That is one of those times that we listen to and should leverage experts, and he's done that.
And at the same time that he's been dealing with, Chinese, Indonesian,
absolutely,
South Pacific, Ukrainian, Russian, like we've got stuff that he's having to keep his eye on, and we haven't gone to World War III.
No, and when it's complicated. It is an incredibly complicated challenge, and when you look at the joint military world, what you're really looking at is trying to bring things back to an acceptable set of circumstances, right? You know, you're not going to make it perfect, but you have an acceptable set of circumstances. And, you know, he has done his best to return many of these situations. He's not going to return them to perfect, but to return them to an acceptable set of circumstances, you know, to protect U.S. national interests. And that's hard. You know, Ukraine, again, is a great, you know, example. I am a supporter. They are, having spent 3 years looking at and thinking about this very problem. You know, we looked at a scenario and situation that is very similar to what happened.
Which isn't a new situation.
No, it's not.
What people need to understand, this happened way back when Trump was in office. There was seceding land and moves by Russia that they make it act like this is just a Biden problem. Well, this has been going on for years.
This happened in Georgia, then it happened in Crimea, you know, then the invasion into Ukraine. You know, in our debate last week, it was one of the things that came up, and my opponent liked to, you know, try and blame the decision that Putin made to invade Ukraine on the fact that Biden was there, and it was all tied to the pullout from Afghanistan. And I countered him and said, you know, he didn't invade in a Trump administration because he didn't need to.
Right.
He knew that as long as Trump was there, he had a friend, and he could continue to use his influence, his, you know, basically to force his will into that region of the world, and he wasn't going to be checked. And the decision to do it early in a Biden administration was the fear of, I've got 6 or 7 years where I'm not going to have this freedom. And so he acted on it because, you know, in his risk analysis, that was the decision. And so when people say, well, he didn't invade under Trump, he didn't need to invade under Trump. He was going to have his will as long as Trump was president.
Well, and it doesn't go to anything to say that Trump was helping to manipulate these chess pieces. When we pulled Pence from going to the inauguration, it sent a very clear message to Putin that we were not supporting Zelensky. And Zelensky even said that, like, you can't not show up. You're going to put us at war. And that's where Russia knew that they could invade.
Yeah. Well, first off, we do have a responsibility to our NATO partners. This is the most successful alliance in the history of the world. You know, for my Republican friends who tend to fall on the side of worrying about the economy, the transatlantic economic impact that happens is, you know, there's $1 trillion worth of trade that happens between the U.S. and Europe. You know, that is profound. And disruption of that, which we have seen happen before when there has been significant conflict in Europe, that affects $1 trillion in our economy. When you start to look at outside investment into the United States, you know, we're talking about 20% of that comes from Europe. We have a significant interest in protecting that first. Also, you know, it is our responsibility to meet our requirements within, you know, the alliance. And even though Ukraine is not a member of the alliance, it is alliance adjacent right now, just geographically. When you threaten Ukraine, you begin to threaten Poland. You begin to threaten the Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. All of those things start to become a real problem, and they are our allies. So it is our responsibility, and it's in our own best interest to do it. People have talked about all this money is going to Ukraine. So there have been about $175 billion that have gone in those aid packages. Of that $175 billion, $107 billion has gone to Ukraine. So that difference in between those, that's been training programs, that's been going to allies in the adjacent region for lots of different stuff. But of the $107 billion that went to Ukraine, about $70 billion of that was allocated out of either the Presidential Drawdown Authority or the Foreign Military Financing Program, which means that was in-kind contributions of oftentimes aging equipment, aging munitions, you know, those kind of capabilities. Or It was equipment that we loaned money to Ukraine for them to turn around and spend
Back with us.
back with the U.S. So it isn't like we're flying, sending $70 billion in $100 bills over there. That's not how that works.
And most of that industry is right here in Arkansas.
A lot of it is. So there are 13 weapons, 13 weapon systems or munitions of all of those that are manufactured here in Arkansas. 12 in Camden, one up in Rogers, and there are 30 cities in the United States who are seeing economic boom because that money is coming back and going into those. Also, if you're part of the Department of Defense, one of the challenges you always have is readiness and modernization. And the real focus of the Department of Defense and the Department of the Army, because I can speak on that one in particular, the real focus of that going forward into 2030 was modernization. And these efforts, almost accidentally, these efforts are supporting that modernization effort because it's forcing us to
upgrade
move quicker.
systems.
Yeah, upgrade systems, move quicker on those munitions that we were going to replace, move faster into upgrading those systems. And so, that is a tangential benefit. But, when we start to talk about how this all works, this idea that people have that, we're just throwing money away and we're throwing it at Ukraine, it's going into training. It's going into, all of these capabilities that are being upgraded. I say this, when it comes to our national defense, you always want to play an away game. You don't want it here. You don't want it home. You don't want to play a home game. It's a proven fact, and I think we've seen this when I said that earlier about Georgia and then Crimea. This is all part of a plan, and if it's not stopped, it will continue into other parts of Europe, who are our NATO allies and who will draw us into a conflict. And
with boots on the ground.
Yes, and so that's our commitment, and so we're wisest to do this now.
I think all of that gives the people good insight into understanding that you have the credentials, you have the understanding, you know how the pieces fit. And that's something that we need to take into consideration right now. I do know that you also lived south of the Rio Grande for a little while, so you know a little bit about immigration.
I did. And what's funny is that, people, there was someone that commented, "Oh, what part of Texas is south of the Rio Grande?" And I'm like, all you're doing is proving that you don't know anything about that part of the world. And I wanted to say, right there next to the little town of Canutillo, across the bridge on Artcraft Boulevard. I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but yeah, we did. So I was 2013 to 14. My family and I were stationed there at Fort Bliss, Texas, and our house actually was south of the Rio Grande, almost over to the New Mexico line. So we have seen this. I've looked at this, and I understand this problem. I also recently, the Arkansas National Guard had a requirement to send soldiers,
which was already in place prior to Sarah Huckabee becoming governor.
Oh yeah, through Joint Task Force Bravo, and then JTF North. There's a lot of them down there, but there has been a active duty support mission that has happened down on the border for more than a decade, and so the Arkansas National Guard unit was identified to do that. So as part of my job, we worked with them to understand the training programs they would need to go through, the requirements of that, understanding the terrain that they would be responsible for in the support mission, and so this is an issue and a challenge that is not new to me. And again, I reference back to our debate. My opponent is a supporter of HR 2, which really focuses a lot on building the wall, and his feeling was that previous bipartisan efforts did not address enough. And my response back to that and my frustration with that was, there was a bipartisan deal that would have moved us forward, and he worked to table that in March, and it still sits there in committee, hasn't moved forward. There's really two problems. There is both a humanitarian crisis and there is a national security crisis. And I think Democrats, Republicans all agree with that. We've got to look at reform, reasonable reform in our immigration system. The idea that we're going to have a mass deportation, first off, that is unrealistic. And second, it's something in the order of about $350 billion that's going to cost to even start something like that. The idea that we would build this wall, clearly Mexico's not paying for it. And
they're digging holes underneath.
And they're digging holes underneath. So what we've got to do is look at reform in our policy. Let's look at policies that get those people that are here now. What do we do to get them on the path to citizenship? What do we do to get them into part of our legitimate economy and contributing? So that's one. What do we do about the folks that came here as children and have only known being American? How do we get them on the path to citizenship? We do legitimately have concerns about fentanyl, for example, coming in our border. That's not being brought, in the most part, by illegal immigrants. That is being brought by U.S. citizens.
By trucks.
Yeah, that are going down to get it. So let's address that. The bipartisan bill would have put those detection systems there. It would have added, I want to say it's 1,200, might be 1,500. It would have added more Customs and Border agents to address those personnel shortfalls. It would have added the infrastructure. So that's the kind of thing that we've got to do to address comprehensive reform. Another thing, there's a bipartisan bill by Representative Salazar and Escobar of Texas and Florida, Republican and Democrat, the Dignity Act, that directed the State Department to engage those nations that are the source and to look at what we can do to engage those nations so we can work with them to head this migrant crisis off. It also looked at pushing capabilities down into Mexico so that when people were seeking asylum, they could do that prior to being on the southern border. And
500 miles before they get to the United States.
Yeah, so let's look at those solutions instead of this idea of, okay, we're going to build a wall and they're all just going to stop because there's a wall there, which is unrealistic.
You're running for Congress, and a big issue, especially here in Arkansas, is reproductive rights. And they've talked about national abortion bans. And to say that this isn't a national issue is not fair, because they're saying push it back to the states to vote. But we know here in Arkansas, they won't let us vote.
The idea of pushing it to the states, what we have now is we have a patchwork. And look, as a nation, we can't have a patchwork of places where women have reproductive rights and where they don't.
Right.
That doesn't work. And it does, and we're seeing it not work now. We're seeing it in places where we have doctors that are concerned to provide the care they know based on their expertise that they should give, but they're concerned about doing that because they might be prosecuted. We've talked about that in Arkansas there hasn't been any legal abortions that have happened in the last year since all this, at least the last year.
Right.
But you can't tell me there haven't been rapes in the last year, and there haven't been incidences of incest in the last year. So it's simply cruel that we have that type of law that is putting, at the time where people are most vulnerable and in the worst situation, we are compounding it and denying them care, and we are denying them assistance. I get very angry about that. I have a 19-year-old daughter, and my 19-year-old daughter in this state has less rights than her grandmother had 50 years ago. And I can't see how we as Arkansans are looking at that as a positive thing. And so I think you're right. There are a lot of people upset about it. There are a lot of people who feel that their voices were silenced when the decision not to have it on the ballot happened. And I think that we will see those people turn out and they will vote their conscience. And women will vote in their own interest. And I think that's going to have an incredible impact on this election.
I do too. Thank you for being here today. I appreciate the time that you've taken. Could you just tell everybody how to get in touch with you, how to follow your campaign, how to give you some money?
Absolutely. So our website is marcusjonesforcongress.com. We kept it simple. But we are also on all of the social media pages at Marcus for AR. So on what used to be Twitter, so X and Instagram, Facebook, Threads, TikTok. If you're interested in volunteering, please go to our website. We have a link on there to sign up to volunteer. We have folks knocking on doors and canvassing. Matter of fact, that's where I'm going right now, is to knock on doors in West Little Rock. But we have opportunities for volunteering. And as always, if you wish to donate, you can go there and link off of our website, our donation site, which that one links to Good Change. That is a woman-owned local business for fundraising here in Little Rock. And, we try and use that because we try and keep as much as possible our campaign dollars in Arkansas. And I'm excited about your listeners to hear all that. And I hope that they get excited and support our campaign.
Y'all, we can make the difference. And right now, Kamala is helping push the voters out. Registrations were 1,000 people a day in Arkansas since she jumped in the race. And it's going to take us to get Colonel Jones elected and get a new pathway. Thank you again for being here and joining us today and sharing your insights on the critical issues. It's been enlightening to hear about your plans for Arkansas and how your experiences have prepared for this role. To our listeners, remember that staying informed is crucial as we approach the November elections. Your engagement makes a difference in shaping our state's future. Follow Marcus's campaign to learn more about his platform and how you can get involved. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and remember, regnant populace, y'all. Let the people rule.